to most Americans, when they think about you, they compare you to President Trump for a few different reasons. One, both of you are very loud. Both of you are not afraid of being controversial. Both of you are very strong. Both of you have 5 kids. Both of you have been married 3 times. First marriage, 3 kids. Second one, third one. Both of you ran as somebody that nobody thought was going to win. President Trump won in 2016. You won in 2018, right? And then in 2020, President Biden wins. A lot of controversy in the States. For you, 2022, Lula wins. A lot of controversy in the States. 2024, President Trump wins. He's a big supporter of you. Your election is not happening until 2026. What is the likelihood of you being able to run in 2026?
We have one more thing in common. I was stabbed and he was shot. What should I expect from Trump? As president, and he too, for 2 years together, we had an excellent relationship. I always knew my place. The U.S. GDP is 14 times larger than ours. So obviously, my aspirations were much smaller, and I've always talked to him about Brazil's potential. We competed in some things, like, for example, in the coals, and others not at all. And they could do excellent North-South trade. It would greatly strengthen, in my opinion, the democratic world. So based on that, I would say we had a great relationship. Back there, in his last year, he had a problem with corn ethanol, and I had steel here in Brazil. And we understood each other quickly, and we solved the respective issues. We had similar dreams for the future. As you argued with me a lot about the Venezuela issue, we did not proceed because it was not reread. And also, economic issues, for example, he helped us with many things, like Brazil became a great ally country, former NATO member, interest of the armed forces. I exempted the Americans from a visa to come to Brazil as a tourist. He suspended the embargo on the meat coming from Brazil. That is, we would have started an excellent relationship if he had been re-elected. I am sure the same thing would happen to me in Brazil.
Very interesting to say that. I mean, we can go through, obviously for you, your background, you came more from the military side. You were in the military, you became a captain, then you went and became in Congress for 27 years. I think the last 4 years, you and your son, Eduardo, were also serving at the same time, which must have been interesting. And then you got into politics. But the question I have for you now in 2026, okay, as of right now, the big difference between the Brazilian situation that you're in than the one he was in. If in America, they had the ability for Supreme Court to not allow the president to be on the ballot in Colorado or many other states, they tried. They couldn't because in the US, you know, conservatives had the Supreme Court 5-4 or 6-3 because the president flipped 3 seats, right? In the Constitution that we have with the Supreme Court. Here, you guys have 11 Supreme Court justices, of which the 11, 2 of them you appointed that are conservative, and the rest, I think 4 is from center, another 4 is from Liberal Party, with one of them being also considered conservative, which is Zanin, it's Cristiano Zanin, who got in, but you know he's center conservative, maybe not as conservative as you are. Do you think the role of you not having control of the Supreme Court worked against you in the 2022 election?
First, let me add to your first question. What do I expect from Trump and the American government? The same goes for Venezuela. Serious democracies around the world did not accept the result of Venezuela, considering that Maduro did not present the election minutes. What I hope will happen in Brazil, just to be acknowledged, elected, the one who has competed with the process, where all of the votes can be audited and have their count made public. Our situation here, it's a big black box, and also not to be accepted. electing someone whose opposition have been silenced, excluded. For minor issues, for instance, in my case, not being able to be eligible. In other words, the system here, the deep state, works to remove the opponents from Lula or the left. And I am here in Brazil at the moment, the only right-wing leader, like Trump in the United States. I hope this really comes to happen here, from the heads of state from all around the world not recognizing an election conducted this way. The issue of the Supreme Federal Court becomes a problem in Brazil, which is where most of the ministers constantly express themselves publicly to the press, give their opinions. They even go into the Brazilian parliament to do what they want and do not want, and publicly threaten some ministers. If such a proposal goes forward, then we shall consider it unconstitutional. That's the problem we have. In my specific case, I am waiting. This last process that I am responding to, they tried every way to convict me of something and failed. Now they have invented a story of a coup in Brazil. This is a process that will drag on. I can, at the last moment, next year, register my application. By then I will definitely be there, gathering crowds in Brazil, just like I always did while president, while as a candidate back then and now, even for 2 years too. What power do I have to try to persuade the Supreme Court from the idea of removing myself from the political dispute? What do I understand? My non-candidacy is a denial of our democracy. The concept of ineligibility does not exist in the United States. They made it up here. I don't have any convictions, not even corruption allegations, nothing. And they keep wanting to make me ineligible, to make me, because I met with ambassadors with a private policy of mine to meet with ambassadors, where I showed here the inquiry, number 1361, highlighting the inconsistencies of our electoral system, a document produced by the Supreme Electoral Court itself. Because of this, one of the disqualifications, and this investigation, believe it, Minister Alexandre Moraes, it was a blatant inquiry. Everyone could see it. He classified it as confidential, meaning a secret inquiry. Regarding that inquiry, the whole problem we are experiencing here in Brazil right now, the minister will just have to lift the secrecy of this inquiry, that I believe everything will be resolved here concerning the electronic voting machines and the last elections.
I agree, but the point I'm trying to make here is the fact that if in the U.S. the establishment and the left could silence Trump to not be able to run in 2024, they would have done exactly the same thing they did to you. Exactly the same thing. The only reason they couldn't is because he had control Supreme Court, where they couldn't go after him. If you were to break down the difference, so for some of us that maybe we don't know the difference, what is the difference in your Constitution versus ours, and what's the difference in your Supreme Court and ours?
Our Supreme Court here is totally politicized. America, on the other hand, I have never seen a minister being interviewed. The member of the Supreme Court giving an interview is not participating. And most of them there were labeled as conservatives. So it's a result that is always aimed at the interests of the people. Here, for example, how it should be in the United States. The decision is made by the parliament and the president, and the judiciary stays away. It only gets involved to settle some specific issues. In Brazil, it is completely different. The judiciary there is always ahead of the decisions. For example, I fight for printed voting, similar to what is in Venezuela now, since 2012. Because I want an additional security barrier during the election period. In Brazil, even though the Constitution provides for a public vote count, it is not done. The counting is done inside a secret room of the Supreme Electoral Court. And you might ask, how did you get elected in 2018? The answer is in that secret inquiry of November 2018, 1 week after my election. And there it is, the proof. Proof of the vulnerabilities of the Superior Electoral Court. Although here in Brazil, already in the 2018 elections, aside from this problem, I was actively involved in the Superior Electoral Court, which has 7 ministers. 3 from the Supreme Federal Court, all 3 of them, indicated by the left. They worked actively against my re-election. For example, I couldn't show images from Lula back there with Chavez, with Maduro back there with Fidel Castro, with Daniel Ortega, with Ahmadinejad, Lula defending Iran's nuclear program so that it could enrich uranium above 20% to create an atomic bomb. I couldn't show images of September 7th. I became ineligible on September 7th, Brazil's Independence Day, the other ineligibility. The parade is over. I handed over my sash and left. Talked to the people, get on a sound truck, and gave the speech. That the Supreme Electoral Court of Alexandre Moraes says that I was abusing economic power. Where I didn't spend a cent, the sound car belonged to the Brazilian pastor named Silas Malafaia. That is to say, on Independence Day, I am punished with ineligibility. In addition to the meeting with ambassadors, another ineligibility and a fine. In other words, everything here was intensified and made more difficult for me. I couldn't, for example, say that Lula was in favor of abortion, that he was in favor, sympathetic to cell phone thieves because they just wanted to have a beer. We have a video of him saying that, and it couldn't be shown. In other words, we couldn't show anything from the other side. On this side, they accused me of everything, of being xenophobic, of homicide, of pedophilia. I mean, everything. They even accused me of trying to kill a city councilwoman in Rio in 2018. And what did they discover before the elections? That the killer was someone else. I had nothing to do with it. Just the accused, the killer, lived in my condominium of 150 houses. Since he lived there, I was obviously behind that murder. They accused me of everything you can imagine, believe me. Even that mini submarine that collapsed at the bottom of the sea. I was also mentioned as having some involvement because one of my ministers, the Minister of Mines and Energy, our only astronaut, I had a contract with that company because he studies from 0 gravity to maximum gravity, and because of that, it had something to do with me. They even accused me of harassing a whale in Brazil. I am the only Brazilian citizen to have ever been sued for harassing a whale. In other words, the accusations here are varied, such as receiving a gift from Saudi Arabia, like, for example, vaccination card scam. Everything you can imagine, all they have left is the figure of a coup, because it's something that didn't happen. Just the other day, chatting with a colleague from Israel, I've made friends all over the world. He said, what is this scam that the Mossad did not know about? In other words, Brazil is what you see now, and now the Supreme Court. I apologize with all the respect I must have for the Supreme Court, but if Mother Teresa of Calcutta were interested in most of them, she would be convicted by our Supreme Court.
Brazil, I'm so glad you're watching this. I want to tell you something here. Do you know what's the one thing tyrants or criminals in politics, in your government, you know what's the one thing they hate? Is for the people to have hope. It's been said, man and women can live 40 days without food, 4 days without water, 4 minutes without air, but only 4 seconds without hope. When I was in Brazil, we had dinner with Nicolas Ferreira. And while we're having dinner, we gave him a shirt and we took a picture together. It's called Future Looks Bright with Brazilian flag. I would love nothing more than to see thousands and thousands of people in Brazil to wear a shirt that says Future Looks Bright with your flag. Just for Brazil, we made these custom shirts for you. If you want to inject the spirit of hope in Brazil, go place 1 order, 2, 3, buy it for your peers, your family. Click on a link below or go to vtmerch.com and sport your Future Looks Bright shirt in Brazil. Let the dictators, let the tyrants get so angry the fact that you are optimistic about the future. If you enjoyed this video, you want to watch more videos like this, click here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click here.